That's better. Okay then. Right, first, it's quite pleasant to be back in the chamber. Welcome everybody, and welcome Alice. Somewhere here, I can see you there. Nobody can. When you've got these things on, you can't really see people, can you? No, they're normally awful, but anyway, we'll move on and take apologies for absence. There are none there. Okay. So on page 5 to 7, item 2, you've got to approve the correct record. Minutes of meeting held on the 18th of March. I'll move those. Agreed? Okay, thank you. Moving on to declarations of interests. Anybody wish to declare an interest, pecuniary or non-pecuniary? None declared, thank you. And we'll move on again to the item 4, which is the final report recommendations of the Surface Water Flooding Working Group. And Liz, I've seen Liz somewhere. She's there, that's it. Thanks Liz, I'll switch off.
Oh, hello, thank you for inviting me to come to the meeting today to talk about the outcome of the flooding working group that we've had under the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As you'll see in the papers, it's been a very thorough review and it's been really, really interesting. I've been part of the group and it's been really, really interesting to take part in and find out a bit more about flooding, how we deal with it and, things that we could do it perhaps a little bit better. First of all, I want to say thank you to the officers who've been heavily involved in this group. John Evans and Grant Eilert have helped us an awful lot, and we're very grateful for them helping us when they're in such busy times with the COVID pandemic as well. So Gedling Borough Council has lots of processes that they undertake before expected flooding and during a flood event. And we found that those processes that were pretty good and in quite good order. So now moving on to the recommendations in the report, they actually don't seem too onerous really. We think it's generally things around communications because we learnt a lot of things that we didn't know were possible or could happen, and we felt that our residents probably need to know them a bit more. So such as the residents' responsibility to prepare their property for flooding and potential flooding, and such as by preparing their property, and also responsible disposal of waste, because we found some people dropping garden waste in the drains and things and blocking up drains in that way. There's a list that vulnerable people can be added to if they're people who might need assistance urgently during a flood event, if they might need water to be supplied to them, etc., like drinking water, things like that. There's a list that they can go on, so we thought it'd be good to communicate that a little bit better to get people to, add themselves to that, and also who to contact in an emergency. So we thought there could be some general communications around perhaps putting some information out with a bin calendar, an annual article in Contacts magazine, and some things for the ward councillors to do, flag areas that are a risk from flooding. There might be some areas that perhaps aren't covered as well as others, and encourage some more flood warden screens across the borough where it's appropriate. So basically, I think we're doing okay, but perhaps communication could make things a little bit better, and we'll be glad to hear your thoughts on that and feedback to the committee and put some of those things in place. Thank you. Thanks, Liz.
Any comments? David?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Liz for the report. I think it's an interesting, useful departure for scrutiny to be looking more outwards, particularly where there's areas where there's partnership working and where there's possibility of overlap. But I suppose before I start, I'd want to echo the last sentence before the last paragraph before the recommendation, which talks about the sterling work by officers to identify and plan for flooding events. I went down to when Bentwell Avenue flooded a couple of years ago, was it, Henry? And I went down there, and the day after, and we got the PASC team and we got public protection team all out there working, making a real difference to people on the ground. I have got a couple of specific questions. Going back to the roles and responsibilities, and the question is, in my mind, is whether the responsibilities are clear. And on page 14, the middle paragraph talks about the PASC team sweeping and clearing drainage gullies, but but then later on it says the unblocking of gullies is a highways responsibility. So is it a highways responsibility, or do we have a role, or do we just do it out of because it needs to be done, I suppose? That's the one. And the second question, when we had the budget discussion, the opposition party tabled an amendment to take 25,000 from the flood alleviation budget and move it into allocate it for secure flood alleviation packs in secure locations. I just wonder if this was discussed in the working group, and what would the view was taken, and did it come from the working group? Because it doesn't appear to be in this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, David. Liz?
Yeah, I'll just come back on that. I'll come back on the thing about the budget first. We didn't discuss that in the working group. We'd virtually finished our working group before the budget happened, so that certainly didn't come out of the working group. And it wasn't mentioned. We did have our final meeting after the budget, and it wasn't mentioned in that meeting, as far as I can remember. So I think we're kind of hoping we can cover some of that with, you know, either what we said at budget time or what we've put in place here to help with the, you know, the communications, etc. As for the sweep in the streets now, there's two different bits, but now I can't exactly tell you which. I know our parks team do some stuff, and obviously road sweeping and that, they do the road sweeping. But then I think the county council clear out some of the gullies more. It's like a deeper clean, if you like. Does that help?
Rapid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think all in all, our staff done a tremendous job under the circumstances. I went up on Bento 11 on one of the mornings when it happened, and everybody was praising the staff, what they'd done and what they'd got in touch with the residents and the neighbours. And they'd done a really bloody good job under the circumstances. And I think we have to learn from what we've done. And I think what we've done at Gedling was probably better than most other district councils. We know where our problems is, and we seem to be on top of them as soon as it happens. And our lads were there straight away, and we'd done the job, and that's what they were paid for, and they've done a very, very good job. And I think we should thank them very much for what they did at the time, because it was bloody hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenny?
Is that it? Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Liz, for the report. It was interesting to read. Going back to the paragraph that David identified on page 14, talks about the concern of members was the blocking of gullies by leaves. And yes, this is true, but it also goes on to say that the clearing and unblocking of gullies is a county highways responsibility, and they undertake regular programme of gully clearing. I'd be sort of quite interested to hear what that regular programme entails, because my personal experience is that I've had considerable problems getting gullies cleared by the county council. And in fact, I had to send a photo of one that was actually growing plants because it had been blocked for so long. So we seem to be undertaking our responsibility in terms of keeping the leaves off. But I wonder what pressure the scrutiny group is going to put on the county council to undertake their responsibilities.
Thank you. Anybody else? Michael, sorry.
Yeah, thanks, John. Just following on from Councillor Ellis's point, first of all, just to thank Liz and the wider team for the piece of work, clearly an important issue. I do note that the author of this report is the self-same councillor who, as Councillor Ellis said, came to the budget debate and proposed flood resilience packs and wiring money away from a piece of infrastructure that has caused devastation to quite a lot of residents in Arnold to create those flood resilience packs. I am slightly concerned to hear from Councillor Clooney, who of course is here to answer for the group today, not here to answer for the author of the report, that this was a deep dive piece of work on an important issue, and the issue of flood resilience packs wasn't raised in those conversations. So why did it find itself in the debate at the budget, and why wasn't it raised here by that self-same councillor whose name is the author of this report? Liz has obviously said it didn't feature in those conversations, and that worries me. And I just wonder whether it's worth the group having further consideration in terms of the recommendations that are being made, John, before we come to a final view, which obviously the Cabinet could iterate back. The other thing, just to follow on from Councillor Hollingsworth, is, truth be told, whilst these recommendations, I think, are eminently sensible recommendations, they do feel to me like they're putting the lion's share of the burden onto residents and not onto actually the lead local flood authority, which, let's be absolutely clear, statutorily is the county council. And as Jenny says, Councillor Hollingsworth says, unless and until we sort out the bread and butter issues of clearing out gullies on a routine maintenance programme, which doesn't appear to me to be taking place effectively by the county council, we will continue to see issues in Arnold around the Bentwell Avenue area, on the Bestwood Lodge Drive area, in the Burton Joyce and Trent Valley area, in the Netherfield area, in other areas that we know are prone and susceptible to flooding. So I think, as well as the increased and improved communication, which I think is very, very sensible, suggested here, what actually needs to happen is some strong lobbying. The author of the report finds him in a position himself of now being a county councillor in an administration at the county council, and I think his time would be well spent, instead of making recommendations about articles in contacts here at the Borough Council, lobbying his own colleagues at the administration to make sure that this is prioritised and that flooding is taken seriously, that we see increased capital investment in terms of tackling some of the hotspot areas in the borough, and that we get on top of this issue. But I think this piece of work in and of itself is a helpful piece of work. I think we should thank Councillor Clooney for coming here today and presenting it and taking our questions and giving it the attention it deserves. But I really do think we now need to be putting pressure on the county council. May I also say the government needs to play its part in this. And we need to make sure that Gedling Borough is receiving its fair share of funding. And on past record, I won't hold my breath, Leader, because we know that we don't always receive our fair share of funding, be that the towns fund, the high streets fund, the Levelling Up fund, where we find ourselves in Tier 2 rather than in Tier 1. So I think we need to be putting a bit of pressure on our MPs as well to make sure that the funding is forthcoming, so that we can avoid the travesty that we saw, as Councillor Ellis said, particularly on Bentwell Avenue, where Councillor Wheeler lives, and where some residents, including one resident I spoke to 2 weeks ago, are still waiting for a boundary hedge and fence to be replaced by Jigsaw Homes after the devastation that it caused in their house and in their garden. That is absolutely outrageous, and it's those people that should be at the forefront of our minds when we're deliberating around these issues.
Thank you, Michael. Anybody else on this? Henry?
Thank you. As a resident of Bentwell Avenue, I mean, I've looked at the report and I can see the recommendations in there, and there is an awful lot of emphasis on what residents can do. And as Councillor Payne has pointed out, there's very little, if anything, mentioned about the lead flood authority, the county council. And as rightly been stated, it's nearly two years onwards. There are still things that haven't been done to mitigate the damage that was done by the flooding in 2019. I think the county council needs to do more, a lot more, in terms of its responsibilities for clearing out gullies, not just the gullies, but doing its work around helping residents to, when these things happen, they need to do a lot more. I think Gedling Borough Council actually did a massive, operation. It was absolutely sterling, brilliant job by our workers at that point in time. But as I say, that there's still a lot that needs to be done, and I think whilst residents can mitigate some of those issues, there's far too much emphasis in this report on residents and not enough on the lead flood authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz?
Yeah, I'd just like to come back on that in saying our officers were of the mind saying that to a certain extent things are residents' responsibilities, to make their property ready, and as much as is absolutely possible. And we did have problems in engaging the county council. I think a lot of it was because of COVID and their people were busy. The emergency planning sort of people were busy with COVID, and it was hard. Excuse me. It was hard for us to engage with the county. But so if you, I think you have a right of reply to the committee, don't you, in 28 days? And so within that, if those things are mentioned, that will be the thing to do. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Anyone else? So we've been asking to provide a written response to recommendations, which we can do, and we can cover all those aspects that's been raised. I think it's a starter, this one is. It's a starter to go back, and whether we take it back to you, Liz, at the committee, there are lots of things in there. We have, like Michael, I think, mentioned that we've put a lot of onus on the householder, and that's quite true up to a point. But we have to say and define amongst the agencies who does it. And looking at my 151 officer somewhere there, Alison, who pays for it? You know, there's a certain amount of council tax can go to it, but it seems to we're doing a lot of work at the borough to cover other agencies, and it's not just the county council, it's the, you know, government agencies, the water board and everybody else. And I remember, you know, in the recent elections, looking at Bestwood Lodge Drive, which has been continuous, and I was showing Gary when he was helping me one day, the water that comes off the fields, for anybody knows that, from Sherwood Lodge, comes straight down here and blocks it, and because the people have had continuous problems there. It's been eased a little bit, but it doesn't help when when county have only got one vehicle of their own, I think, and the rest is subcontracted to empty these gullies. And I guarantee that if you walk around within a half a mile of this place, you'll see gullies blocked, which reminds me to remind the chief exec there's one on the main drive that's blocked. But that's probably because the speed hump was put there without anybody putting a pipe under it. But there's lots of things, I think, Liz, in this. You know, I think you can take it back, but we'll send some recommendations. I think, is that the way forward now, to send that written observations back? Yes. We'll do that and then have a look at it again and find out, because people, you know, I know in Netherfield years ago there was in this chamber actually, I was sat there on a planning meeting, asked them to build some houses bring them up. I wanted to bring them up about 18 inches, and they refused to do it. They said on costs. I said, well, you'll get the flooding. And I think it was 3 times in 7 years, there was all sorts of stuff went through people's houses, and we had severe flooding. We then put a mound in that was put in, and it was put in by this borough because nobody else had funded it. It's never been flooded since. That diverted the water away and down into the natural way down towards the Trent. So if we agree that, so consider the report recommendations, so we've done that. We'll provide a written response. Can we make sure when we give that response it goes to every member? And then ask the scrutiny committee to help out there, along with professional advice, which will come from Alice's crew down at the depot, etc., to say which is the way to do it. Not sort of, you know, once everything's that you've got flooded, and then we're giving some advice there what you should be doing. And who was it raised about the floods in 1997? The floods were terrible then, and people's houses were ruined. So, anybody else any more comments on that? I think we need to dig a lot deeper to try and solve this problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue here with residences is, certainly in Bentwell Avenue's case, is it wasn't the first time that they'd been flooded. They'd been flooded on various occasions in the past. So, and they had been given advice about flooding, but they were told, blatantly told, that the last flood before the one in 2019 would be a once-in-a-100-year event. So on that basis, they were told that there would not be another flood. But also, you know, but it happened again, and this time it caused hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of damage. It caused residents to be made homeless on Bonington, and like I say, the damage is still visible now. You can still see the damage from that flood. So it's okay saying to residents, you know, you need to prepare for flooding and stuff. But when residents are told that it's not going to happen again, you know, then there needs to be more work done around that in terms of the communication, because obviously with climate change, the severity of storms, you know, these storms are going to happen more and more often, and residents need to be prepared for these events. So, you know, I mean, 2019 was unexpected. Nobody on Bentwell Avenue knew that was going to happen. We knew that it was a possibility. But we didn't know it was going to happen there and then, because we were told it wouldn't happen again. So it's difficult for residents to prepare for flooding if they're told that it's not going to happen. You know, what do you do? I mean, I know the insurance premiums along that street have shot up hugely as a result of that. And some people, in some cases, some people can't afford the insurance because of how much it is. It's an absolute fortune. Some people are having to fork out for the damage that was done. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry. And you've hit it on the head there. The insurance, I'm just thinking about that on Rotherston Drive, Michael. There are about another 150, 200 homes going on there, which will contribute to that problem, which is yet to be resolved down there. So, also I was thinking, Mike, about yesterday our discussion about the pump at Colic. We've got a big pump down there. Severn Trent haven't got a big pump down there. County Council haven't got a big pump down there. And we'd like our pump back so we could use it somewhere else in an emergency, but we can't at the moment. So anyway, we've digressed a little bit, but so we'll send it back basically to Liz. We'll have we can have a discussion outside of this meeting, and we'll put our recommendations down by giving you a written response. But thank everybody that's involved with it, and I think we can really start to motor on these things. It's similar to what they've done on the County Council with they call it the Linesman project, which is people keeping an eye on the ditches and all the things like that. And also snow wardens and flood wardens, that type of thing. I'm steaming up again. Snow wardens and flood wardens, those types of things. We need to, who does it? Because at the end of the day, people will start ringing, well, haven't you got this, haven't you got that? And if we haven't, we can't defend that position. We need to make sure that we do as much as we possibly can and physically can, but we do need the other agencies on board. And Mike and I have got an invite to meet the new leader of the County Council, so we'll certainly be putting it on that agenda, and we can put it on the agenda for tomorrow. Is it when we meet Tom Randall? Yeah, absolutely. That to try and get some of this extra money that is there, but seems to be drifting off to other places. And I think if we do it in that manner, we might just get some response. So are we agreed to those recommendations? Yeah, thank you. I'll put my glasses back on. I can see it. We're moving over to item 5. And this is the Gedling Conversation Satisfaction Survey. Alison.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, this report seeks approval for the programme of activities for the 2021 Gedling Conversation and the related resident satisfaction survey, which is detailed in Appendix A of the report. As you know, we usually complete our resident satisfaction survey on a biennial basis to seek the views of our residents, communities, businesses and partners about how we have performed over the previous years to inform what our priorities might be for the forthcoming year. And it's proposed that the survey be completed this year with the distribution of paper copies to all households within the borough, and also to make it available online to ensure that we generate the best response rate possible. Our communities team will also liaise with community groups to encourage their members to complete the survey to try and ensure that we reach all of our residents and that all views are represented. The profile of respondents will be collected to determine the success of engagement in reaching all diverse groups. The proposed survey questions and layout remain broadly the same as last time to enable the direct comparison of the results and identification of the trends in the views of our residents in terms of our performance, so that we can effectively inform service planning. There is a new question included within the survey, which is related to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which seeks views in terms of the financial well-being, physical health and mental health impacts of that on our residents. Previously, the conversation has included face-to-face consultation, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the social distancing requirements of that is not recommended as part of the Gedling conversation for this year. It is proposed this year, though, that to include the ongoing consultation for the Young People Survey and ensure that's promoted both within the online paper copy, the online copy and the paper copies as well. So the results of both those surveys will then inform the service planning as we come to that in the autumn. So, Leader, the recommendation is set out there on page 19, and I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.
Thank you. Any comments? David, and then...
No, thank you, Leader, and thanks, Alison, for the report. I'm happy with that. I suppose the only thing I regret, and I know why we're not doing this, is the face-to-face interaction, because I've got fond memories of walking up and down Arnold with officers waylaying people and asking them their opinions. It was quite informative. And I realise that we shouldn't try and design a questionnaire by committee, but there are a couple of points I would like you to take back, if you would. On page 30 and 31, where it talks about the top 5 areas that are important and need improvement, I don't quite see why we make a distinction between Gedling Borough functions and Notts County functions. I think that skews people's thinking. I think just a long list of those, because I mean, it shows how we get into problems, because the one on tackling crime and antisocial behaviour only talks about Gedling Borough, doesn't talk about the police. So I think that could be simplified, we could get a better result. And similarly, the new question 20 about the pandemic, I think the question there needs looking at again. To what extent has COVID pandemic affected you? I think to most people they would say its question is, how far has COVID damaged your financial well-being, your physical health and your mental health? I mean, I can only see a few people that run delivery businesses that will say they've gained from it. But I just think that question's, we could get two different answers. People could be saying that the pandemic's affected them both positively and negatively. And I think we need to be clear there what we're asking or what answer we're getting from them. But other than that, I'm happy to support the report. Thank you.
Thank you, David. You've got Vervin.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Alison. Just to say that we absolutely welcome in 2.3 in terms of the young people being included more in the annual conversation. This discussion came last year when we saw that actually there was quite a low response from our young people within that conversation. So I really welcome that there's going to be a heightened sort of response to this in terms of attracting, and we're hoping that obviously families will and parents will encourage their young people to take part in the survey. Obviously, the next item is about the youth survey that we've had so far, but I absolutely welcome this because I think if we can embed this so that every year young people are included in the annual conversation, I think it will give us a rich amount of information to ensure that actually all our young people and residents in the borough, we are doing the best we can in terms of resources, etc. So thanks, Alison, for that. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks, Viv. Michael?
Yeah, I tend to agree with some of the feedback that David's given, and the point I'd just add to that is clearly some of those issues straddle across numerous authorities. The County Council has got a community safety responsibility, actually, particularly around some of the trading standards issues, but also around other community safety issues. So I think there's a fair point there. I think historically we've done that to try and delineate and make clear that Gedling isn't responsible for everything, which I think sometimes people have a tendency to think, because obviously we issue the council tax bill, but I think there's merit in the point that's been made. And I just wonder if on question 20 it could say maybe to what extent has COVID-19 pandemic negatively affected your, or frame it in a particular way so that we know what the outcome is in terms of the question. The only other thing, Leader, that I just thought about was, given the fact that we know that the issue around local government reorganisation hasn't gone away, and that the last time we asked the residents what their view was about it, I do wonder whether there ought to be a question in here about whether they prefer their services to stay locally with Gedling Borough Council or be subsumed into a wider organisation, because it hasn't gone away. The administration at County Hall have made it very clear that it hasn't gone away. I think the phrase, John, at the last County Council was that the door is still open to those issues. And I'll just be really blunt about this, John. We've just stood in a local election, and I have to say it came up on nearly every other door to me about people's frustration about this constant attempt to try and reorganise local government, rearrange the deck chairs. So I think we just maybe ought to ponder as well whether it's worth asking a question in a straightforward fashion about that issue as well as part of the questions we're asking, because at the end of the day, this is a question about people's services, but actually people also care about how those services are delivered and where they're delivered from. So we might just want to ponder that, obviously, as David says, not design it here by committee, but reflect on that after today's meeting.
Thank you. Anyone else? Peter?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Michael's just said. I think the general public want to know where we stand with the county. We don't know where we stand. We don't know whether we're going to go, whether we're going to stay. And I think it's time somebody made a decision once and for all, whether we're stopping this Gedling or whether we're going into this big organisation. I think most of the people in Gedling would go to stay in Gedling. They like what we do. They're satisfied with what they do. They have some bones, but generally speaking, most people like to live in Gedling. And you talked to people on the knocker, which we've done this last month. People are quite happy to stop in Gedling, and they want Gedling to be run by Gedling Council. And I think the more we start to tell people this is what the public want, the more we're going to get a bloody answer from the county council and central government.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just to clarify that point about the split. So in previous years' questionnaires, that hasn't been there. Excuse me. Excuse me. Just so happens I asked for it this time because for exactly the reason put forward that, you know, the vast majority of responses, the negative responses always say the roads. And because it's a Gedling questionnaire, there's this automatic assumption that the roads are responsibility. So I've suggested we split it this year, but, you know, I'm quite happy to remove that again. I just thought it was trying to take the focus, the negative focus away from Gedling Borough Council when it is a county council function. But I say we are happy to remove it if that's the consensus in the room. Thank you, Leader.
John, I just wonder if there's a way around it, which is rather than delineating so black and white, you know, is there a really clear statement above that question that says that Gedling Borough Council isn't responsible for all services, and Nottinghamshire Council is also responsible? You know, I think there's a way you can frame it without trying to delineate the individual services where it's perhaps not as clear cut, because I think Mike makes a very good point, and those of us who took part in the face-to-face conversations over numerous years, as David says, people sometimes do come to Gedling with concern. Well, you know, the conversation we've just had about flooding is a case in point. As Councillor Hollingsworth said, you know, people come to us as the local council, but they don't always understand that we don't retain all the council tax and we're not responsible for all the services. So I think the Chief Exec makes a good point. I think the point, I think the point Councillor Ellis is making is there another way we can just frame that? And I'm sure there ought to be a way that we can achieve both without it being so black and white in the way it's set out.
Thank you. Peter?
Mr. Chairman, we've in particular, we've had more people complain to us about the state of the roads, thinking it's Gedling's responsibility, and you have to. They don't realise that we've got no control of it all. We've got more bloody potholes in Gedling Borough than they have in Christendom, and it's about time this. But having said that, when you go everywhere on your car, you can't go nowhere without potholes now, and it's a mess. When Gedling used to do its own, we knew where we got problems, and we could get them sorted out. There's no chat. Well, it just seems chaos that we don't get no repairs done.
Thank you. So, Mike, with that in mind, can we bring a paper back to the committee on how we go move forward? Would that be the way forward?
Ideally, Leader, we'd like to get the questionnaire out sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So could I agree with yourself
and
Michael to sign off the questionnaire? Is that okay?
Yeah. Are we agreed, Cabinet? Yeah. So we're all agreed on that recommendation, which is on page 19. Thank you. We'll move over to the star of the show. That's Viv and Catherine. So your turn, Viv. Who's starting first? Lance is starting first. It's disappeared in the middle there. That's it. Go on, Lance, then.
Thank you very much, Leader. I've got the pleasure of bringing this report today. And really, it's about asking Cabinet to note the findings from the Gedling Borough Youth Survey we undertook, as Councillor McCrossan referred to earlier, during the winter, but also as an opportunity to seek approval on some recommendations, how we can develop engagement with young people further in the borough, improve communications, look at a corporate approach to how we engage with our young people, and also just use data and insight better to inform our advocacy role to try and improve young people's services. So just want to offer a bit of context for Cabinet. Youth engagement's been a big commitment of the Council for many years, facilitated through the Youth Council. Real positive relationship in terms of trying to inform and shape policy. In 2019, Cabinet agreed a new portfolio holder role, which Councillor McCrossan currently sits in, role of equalities in young people, and this has been supported by a policy advisory role, which Councillor Catherine Fox also performs. In addition to that, within the Gedling Plan, an action was embedded to engage with young people in the borough and try and use that engagement to help shape policy making. So moving forward from those developments, the portfolio holder and policy advisor have led a piece of work to really identify needs of young people further through engagement. The plan was in early 2020 to do some commissioned youth engagement, but unfortunately this was postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Come the autumn, proposals were looked at again, and it was agreed to do an online winter survey. And we developed that, working alongside colleagues within the Youth Council as they commenced their virtual meetings again, but also trying to work with our local youth workers from Nottinghamshire County Council in their settings and the engagement they're able to do during the winter period. Our methodology involved contacting local schools, trying to share the survey amongst their communities, and we did some direct targeted work with some vulnerable young people in the youth settings. We also did a social marketing approach supported by our comms team, trying to get the word out of the online survey and also pushed it out through our community e-newsletters. The response was 236 young people, which we consider to be a good response. I think Cabinet should note that this was during December to February, the period, and obviously that was a period of national lockdown, quite unprecedented for us, so young people weren't within school, they generally weren't in community settings, so our approach had to be virtual and digital. And although it's difficult to equate exact proportion of population for the 11 to 16 age group, we could estimate it was about a 3 to 3.5% response rate, which is pretty good in the circumstances. So we're fairly confident with the sample we've got. Appendix B highlights the key findings from the report and the responses to the questions, and our Customer Insight Officer has kindly produced that for us. The key issues to report to Cabinet in the findings, young people in the borough have said bullying is a key issue, issues relating to COVID-19, anxiety about getting a job in the future, but also having aspirations to do that too. Issues of mental health is a concern for young people, and they're also concerned about how people are treated fairly according to their protected characteristic. Issues of environment and climate change are also a big issue for them. The number one park in the borough is Gedling Country Park, they've told us, closely followed by Arnott Hill Park. And an important piece of feedback from the survey was that 80% of respondents supported a dedicated social media platform to engage with young people in the borough. And Instagram was identified as their preferred option to take that forward. Since we've analysed the findings, the policy advisor has worked with the portfolio holder to meet again with the Youth Council, and they've identified some key issues to take forward, and these are documented in the report in Table A. And this is really about a developing action plan to take forward from the findings of the survey. And this includes considering a portal to communicate effectively with young people, working with our partners, and considering that desire to use Instagram in some form to do that. It's also about examining the young person's provision using data and insight to identify improvement to services where necessary, and also looking at organisational cultural change for us as a council, make sure across service areas we're looking to identify young person's needs and develop our services accordingly. If the recommendations in the report are approved in the coming weeks, the portfolio holder and policy advisor will re-engage with the Youth Council to further develop the action plan, and also as officers will look to engage key partners to try and work together and develop ideas to move forward on those recommendations. And as in the last item on Cabinet, and as Councillor McCrossman referred to, we're also going to re-engage with young people concurrently with the Gedling conversation. And really this is just an opportunity to bolster the insight we have, get another good response, and really get that post-lockdown feel of young people as well. As I said, the survey we did was during unprecedented times. So as the months have gone by, it'll be interesting to see what the mood of our young people are. So I put forward to Cabinet the following recommendations. Firstly, to note the findings of the Gedling Young Persons Survey. Secondly, to approve working with the Council's key partners to improve communications with young people by developing a Gedling Borough Young People's digital engagement and information portal. Thirdly, to support a cross-council approach to youth engagement and consideration of young people issues. And finally, for Cabinet to support the use of data and insight about young people in the borough to strengthen the Council's advocacy role to influence the appropriate delivery of services by partners.
Thank you, Lance. Viv?
Thank you, Leader. And first of all, I'm absolutely delighted that this report has come today to Cabinet. I want to do a big thank you to Lance in terms of your dedication and work here, along with Jane Ansell in terms of her work with the Youth Council and the Youth Mayor that have been really tremendous in terms of their support. And of course, my policy officer, Councillor Fox, who's worked tirelessly to ensure that we do get the voice of young people coming today. I think as a council, we are really committed to young people. I mean, I speak here as the new portfolio holder for young people. I think that says a lot in terms of our council and our commitment to young people. We have a really vibrant youth council, and we have one of the first youth mayors. So actually, as a council, we mean we mean what we say in terms of that we want to know what our young people feel about living in the borough and how we can ensure that services that they should be getting from all our partners and agencies are communicated in a way that makes sure that they can access them. I was delighted to see in the survey that 73% of young people said they actually like living in Gedling. Gedling is a place that they feel part of, and they feel part of the community. So I think that was really, really helpful. Our role, as you know, my role as portfolio is about advocacy. It's about ensuring that our young people get the services they should be getting in terms of from the county council, in terms of all the services that the county provide to make sure that Gedling young people know about them, can access them, and are able to tell us what they think about the services that they're getting. Also in terms of the health provision, and we know that mental health, and I know this from the work we did on scrutiny, and I know this in terms of the engagement with the Youth Council, still remains a significant issue and a concern for young people about accessing services and their own mental health and anxiety. And we know that COVID clearly has knocked that markedly over this period. So I'm really positive that moving forward, that we can ensure that we have active communication with young people, that it's meaningful, and that we ensure that we can communicate in a way that they are aware of what's available to them on their doorstep, and that we can also advocate for them where there are gaps in services. Because as you know, obviously in terms of our role as a borough, our role is to champion them. It's not about providing, although I have to say, recently we have developed the 16 to 25-year-old film club at the Bonington, which again we're really proud of, to promote culture and media. So I'm hoping that we can work with partners to move forward in terms of getting a clear platform to, we know that social media is the way forward to communicate with our young people, and I think that I would like to see that as a borough that we're really committed to move this forward. So I encourage Cabinet to agree our recommendations today. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Johnson.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to thank the Leader and the Deputy Leader for the creation of a portfolio that specifically addresses and prioritises concerns and issues relating to young people. It's a privilege to work with Councillor McCrossan as a policy advisor, working on a whole range of initiatives, offering events, support and information provision, and most importantly, giving a voice to the borough's young people. Councillor McCrossan and I's message to our young people is that we are listening and that we are working hard to put your views into action. And this survey and its action plan demonstrates this. I'd like to thank our Youth Mayor, our Youth Council, the young people of Gedling Borough for their views, Kids Against Plastic, and our officers for their work and support on this. And I fully recommend I fully endorse the recommendations in this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you switch off? Thanks. Thank you. That's right. Anyone else? Michael?
Yeah, I just echo what both Councillor McCrossan and Councillor Fox said in terms of thanking Lance and the wider team. Just particularly single out Natasha Radanovich's superb report. She always does a sterling job, I think, of distilling the results from these surveys for us, and has done that again here. But I just wanted to put on record, really, a thanks to both Viv and to Catherine. I think in a very short space of time, you've both made a very, very significant impact in an area where, frankly, we need to be making an impact. And I think the results of this survey show that. I think it is testament to all of you, including officers, that you've achieved in our first attempt, 236 people engaging, 236 voices that otherwise wouldn't have been heard and have never been heard before by this Borough Council in terms of how it provides its services, and markedly more young people involved than a county-wide consultation that took place in 2020, as Natasha draws our attention to in the report. A couple of things that just really struck me, and I think speak to why it's so important that we have a portfolio holder and a policy advisor focused on young people, is, if you like, the marked cultural differences between the younger generations. I view myself still as a relatively young person, but these people have a world of different views to my generation, let alone other generations in the borough. And I thought one of the things that really stood out for me was Section 7 in the response to the survey about how people are treated and whether people think they're treated fairly in terms of characteristics. And there's obviously a marked concern amongst our young generation around issues about disability, around issues about gender identification, around issues about race, religion, gender and sexual orientation, with slightly less concerns in relation to issues about being treated fairly in terms of age, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity. And I just think that there, in one response to the question, presents a challenge to institutions like ours that often are responsive to those who have the vote, which means that you are talking about people who are 18 or plus, often not capturing those who I'm sure have responded to this survey. So I think I see this as two things, both a wake-up call to the council and to other agencies, including the county council, who have a responsibility for these services, and to the government, but also as an effective launchpad for us really, really stepping up our efforts to proactively engage young people in their borough, in their community, as Councillor McCrossan said, who say very loudly and clearly in this survey that they are proud to live here, that they care about their community. And we need to find a way, both through continuing to improve the youth mayor role, the youth council role, but also all those young people who don't want to engage in those processes, a way of them actually being heard, and them being heard here where the decisions are being made, and about how services can improve for them. And I think the recommendations are fantastic. I think the action plan's fantastic. I've had a chance to speak to both Viv and Catherine about particularly the issue around that Lance drew our attention to, the platform. I would really like to see, Leader, outside of this meeting, us engaging with Trent University, with Nottingham University, engaging some of the best and brightest students we've got in the county, and maybe some from the borough, about what they can bring to the table in terms of designing and crafting, and us maybe commissioning them in terms of this platform to engage, because there are people out there who've got the skills that perhaps we haven't got within the council. And I think the other thing, just to put a marker down, I'd be saying we've got the Section 151 officer here, is if we can find a way of the universities engaging, if we can find a way of maybe some of the people in the charitable sector engaging, and some of our young people, we may need to put some resource behind this to make it work. But let's have those conversations first. Let's see whether we can make it work, and let's really, really try and get some meaningful engagement for young people out of this. But I think this is really, really pleasing to see. And I think we said a number of years ago it would be nice, as part of the satisfaction survey, to hear the voice of those people perhaps who don't vote, who don't pick up the leaflet when it comes through the door, as other residents do. And I'm really, really pleased that is now that is now happening. These people, are the future, and they've seriously got, they've got serious concerns about jobs, about how do you afford a home. The economy is likely to go through difficulty following the amount of money that we've spent, quite rightly, in response to COVID. And it's that generation that will have concerns. And, this won't be a popular thing to say, but I will say it. They will also have concerns about issues in relation to Brexit. Wherever you stand on that issue, however you voted on that issue, those decisions, positively or negatively, will impact on that generation in terms of their future life chances and their ability to travel the world, which they reference in this report, being able to see not only their own local community, but other places around the world. So I think this is a sterling piece of work. Credit to you, Lance, and all the officers who've been involved, but I think a particular credit to Viv and Catherine, because I've seen in conversations with both of you just how deeply passionate you are about this, and I've also seen, talking to Henry and others, just how passionate some of the colleagues we've got on the Youth Council and the Youth Mayor really are about their area. This reminds me of a conversation John and I had about 6 or 7 years ago when we visited a Brownian guide group in Gedling Village, I think at the invitation of Councillor Hollingsworth, actually, who may have been there with us, and I was just absolutely struck by these kids who were between probably ages 4 and 5 up to about 8 and 9, who, contrary to what people believed, it was John Robinson at the time who was the chief executive, had very strong views about community safety, about safe ways to walk to and from school, about issues around the environment, about traffic and pollution. And anybody who thought we were just turning up there to learn about the guides and the brownies and, you know, a conversation about the activities they were going on about were absolutely wrong. They knew who we were. They knew that we were from the council. They knew that the council had a role to play in terms of shaping the community, and they'd got a very strong view about it there in Gedling Village at that Brownian guide group. And I think that should give us cause to be optimistic about the future of the borough, because these people are engaged, they do care, and they want to be involved, and they want to shape the way in which the council and indeed the national government is setting out services for them. So I think this is excellent, John, and I really look forward to what the next few steps are.
Thank you, and can I ask Viv or Lance really as to how broadly is this going to be spread, this report? It's not just going to sit in this council's papers and drift off into the ether. In effect, what's the next stage?
Yeah, if I come in first, Leader. Obviously, as I mentioned, you know, Councillor McCrossan and Councillor Fox will be engaged with the Youth Council again, so we'll go through that route. I think there is an opportunity at the right time to push it out through our sort of corporate comms as well, the findings of the report at the right time. We've had a conversation with the communications manager about when we could do that. And the other key thing around the recommendations around that advocacy role is around, you know, making sure our partners are aware of the findings, what young people in the borough are saying, and sharing that. So we have a number of partnerships. We work with both county council-based children's services and health partners that we can push the findings out through. And as the report says, you know, the whole point of the action plan is to work with those partners as well in terms of the development of the actions, because they will play a key lead role in terms of services for young people.
Thank you. Sorry, Viv.
Yeah. Can I just add to that as well? Absolutely. There's no point in sitting if it's just going to sit in our lap, Leader. We absolutely need to get this out. We need to get it out to the Health and Wellbeing Board because of the issues around the mental health of young people, which are absolutely key, and to the County Council, and to our voluntary sector and other organisations, because if one of the key drivers in this is how we're going to engage our partners to ensure that Gedling young people have got a voice, and that we advocate to make sure they get what they need to get. And we know that mental health services, no matter what the government keep telling us that there's money being sloshed around, I can't see a lot of that money being sloshed around. Young people are still waiting on long waiting lists. So our schools don't have the access to mental health services, even though it's been pushed out that schools have access to mental health services. Well, talking to our youth council, that's not the case. So we need to be pushing and advocating there. I welcome what Michael has said in terms of from the Deputy Leader. Thank you so much for all your positive comments. And absolutely the university. I mean, actually our youth council are at university. You know, our youth council have got an awful lot to say, you know, really are great advocates for the borough. And I, again, would want to be working with them to think of the best way forward. But in terms of thinking about our platform, Instagram, how we communicate, let's use the talent that we've got locally to see how we can drive this forward and support what we're doing. But yes, so thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it just reminded me, looking at Henry there, we were talking earlier about the fact that the Health and Wellbeing Board haven't met, or very infrequently, due to the, well, not due to COVID, I just haven't met. I find it highly surprising. But I'm particularly interested in the mental health side of that. We have to keep raising that, because that is going to be the thing that's been left behind after COVID, the amount of people that have got those problems. So, Henry, do you just want to say a word?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is an absolutely fantastic report. It's brilliant. And I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Viv, to Councillor Crossan and to Councillor Fox, and also to Lance and his team as well for the hard work that they've done there. I think the government actually needs to step up on the mark, and the health and wellbeing, to be honest. They need to stop sitting on their hands and actually get their act together, because quite frankly, the mental health there was a crisis before the coronavirus pandemic. And before the coronavirus pandemic, some young people were waiting 18 months before they got an appointment at CAMHS. There's been a lot of talk by the government and actually by the county council in terms of what they're going to do to step up the mark in terms of tackling mental health in schools, but I'm yet to see it. There are supposed to be some mental health teams going into schools, so should be some money going into schools to tackle the issues around mental health. So, for example, there should be invested in things like, there's a thing called ELSA, which is the emotional literacy, social emotional literacy side of things. But also, they did say that they had specific mental health teams that were going to be working within different districts, within schools. Now, I believe that was put on hold because of the coronavirus pandemic. But you know what? The Health and Wellbeing Board, for the last year, has done not an awful lot in terms of meeting with different people, and public health and the CCG and other people around the table. They need to get together. They need to work together, and they need to step up to the mark. And the government needs to put its money where its mouth is, as far as young people is concerned. Quite frankly, we need more resources. And at the next Health and Wellbeing Board meeting, I will actually be raising those points in terms of what are we actually doing for young people post-pandemic as we're coming out of the crisis. What are we actually going to do to tackle those issues around social, emotional, and mental health and well-being? Because these issues aren't going to disappear. They need tackling. They need looking at. But yeah, I think this is a fantastic report. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Henry. And yes, I think there's probably a closer relationship with yourself and the co-conspirators there, if I can call them that, and Lance, to make sure that we do drive this, it doesn't get lost. The point that Michael made is quite right about Trent University. If you look at the help we've had with Trent University, and I'm not on about just the Civic Centre, redesign of that, the interest in general. There's a plaque on that wall over there, which we led on an Erasmus project about apprenticeships and things like that. We led that, and we ought to have been quite proud of that. But unfortunately, you'll see at the back of me, there's a vacancy at the back, and we've had to take the flags down because apparently it's illegal to fly or to show the European flag, which is ridiculous. But they're anyway out of Europe, and we could go on all afternoon and probably all evening over European issues. But there is a fund called the Prosperity Fund. Erasmus, we are told, I've yet to see the facts, and I don't think you've seen it yet, have you, Mike? There's some money coming in to replace Erasmus, and Erasmus, for those people who don't know, is the greatest educational project in the world, and it focuses very much on young people and their futures, and so therefore we need to keep an eye out to make sure that our officers are keeping an eye out for it, ourselves as members are keeping an eye out for those opportunities that we can get people involved. But working Trent Uni, I've found everything that I've done with them, I've done lots with Trent University, from policing to right the way across council services, etc. They've been a perfect partner. So anyway, if there's nobody else got anything else to say, I don't think they have. Move those recommendations on page 35, carried on to page 36. There are 4 items there. I'll move those. Second? We are agreed. Agreed. Thank you. Who's going to do the next one? Welcome, Joe. You're going to introduce the low carbon planning guidance for Gedling Borough, please.
Thank you. So firstly, just to set some context, over recent months, Gedling Borough have been working with Mansfield Council and Nottingham City Councils as part of a steering group to prepare planning guidance on behalf of all Nottinghamshire local authorities to take forward the low carbon agenda. This exercise is now complete and is now for each authority to decide how best to use that guidance. For Gedling Borough, this work has been timely as we're at an early stage of preparing the Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan. This is the first part of our local plan and in due course will replace the Align Core strategy. Our intended approach, therefore, is to use the Nottinghamshire Low Carbon Guidance as a starting point for Gedling-specific low carbon guidance, but also in tandem with that to incorporate the guidance into the emerging Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan. This means that the guidance can be treated as a material planning consideration and help inform the determination of planning applications at the earliest stage. The Gedling-specific guidance is attached as Appendix A to the report. So the Gedling guidance has 3 key sections to draw your attention to. Firstly, it sets the policy context, which sets out the national and local policies supporting the document. This explains how the guidance complements building regulations. It refers to policy 1 of the core strategy and also relevant policies in the local planning document. Secondly, the informal guidance includes a model policy. This, in essence, requires major development proposals to include information on sustainability and the low-carbon credentials of the development in accordance with the checklist. The checklist is effectively a table which sets out all the information to be provided as part of an outline or detailed planning application and flags up information that needs to be submitted now, as well as more aspirational information that will be required in the future. And importantly, this is showing a direction of travel for the Council. So the information that's included in this checklist covers issues such as design, water efficiency, and energy usage. And the checklist has been put together by close collaboration between policy and development management officers to ensure it's a practical tool that developers will engage with. The guidance also sets out practical information for developers to help inform planning application proposals. So it's not prescriptive, but rather informative in nature at this stage. For example, it provides guidance on sustainable layout and design to improve connectivity both within developments and outside of developments. It includes information on maximising site potential, encouraging solar heating of buildings, information on minimising energy usage through insulation, for example, and integrating new development with existing green networks and incorporating SUDs to help mitigate the impact of climate change. So, subject to Cabinet approval, the low-carbon guidance will be a material consideration in terms of decision-making on major planning applications. As I said, elements of the guidance, particularly the model policy and the checklist, will be incorporated in the local plan and will be given greater weight as that gradually progresses through the plan preparation process. However, by approving the guidance now, it shows a clear direction of travel for the Council. It ensures that developers focus on sustainable development as they prepare planning applications, and it also helps officers to more clearly understand and monitor how far sustainable development is being achieved. So the recommendation for this report is that the low-carbon planning guidance appended to the report is approved as informal planning guidance for Gedling Borough. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Jenny?
Yes, just a thank you to Joe and all the other officers and all the other councils who've been involved in developing this. As Joe said, it's just a start and it sets out very clearly the direction of travel. Obviously, the checklist is the basic requirement that we would expect developers to provide, but obviously if they want to provide more than that, we would welcome it even more greatly, but I think the report sets out very clearly the aspirations we've got. So I really welcome this report. It is the start. It's not going to end here because clearly there will be other requirements that are introduced over time, but it will be used as a material planning consideration. And as Joe said, the further we get into the development of the policies, it will have even more weight, but it sets a direction of travel, and I think it's extremely welcome, given our commitment to the climate change.
Thank you. Michael?
Just echo what Councillor Hollingsworth said and thank the team and thank Joe for presenting this here today. I think in essence, as Councillor Hollingsworth said, the executive summary sets out that we declared a climate emergency. This report here today says we mean business. And as Councillor Hollingsworth says, when planning committee is taking decisions around applications, this will now form a material consideration. It shows that we're putting our money, if you like, and our action where our mouth is, and we have to be doing that in relation to the issues that the planet faces. So I think this is a really, really positive step. And there's some cracking examples in here, you know, like the water garden on the highway down on Ribblesdale Road, you know, just over the boundary from Gedling, in terms of not only just trying to slow the flow and take some of the brunt of the flow of surface water off highways, but also the infiltration system, which is taking the contaminants out from the pollution from the vehicles before it then runs down into the Day Brook. And that has to be a good thing, doesn't it? Because clearly there is wildlife and biodiversity that runs alongside those watercourses like the Day Brook. And if it's being absolutely polluted with contaminants because it predominantly runs through an urban area that has areas of air quality management like Daybrook Square, etc., that's doing a damage to the biodiversity that runs along those watercourses as well. So I think this is a really, really thorough report, as we would always expect, Joe, from you and your team. It's very well presented here today, and I think Councillor Hollingsworth and the team should be commended. I think it's a really positive step forward, Leader.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? I just echoes those thoughts there. I think it's brilliant as you start to get into it. And again, it's something you want to, it's obviously going to grow. And we're going to build on it. I was particularly interested, Joe, and I've been in buildings, you know, for a long while, about the positioning of buildings to get the light into, you know, really interesting that. And I'm thinking of Chase Farm, where they seem to be cramming the things in. Was that ever taken into consideration? But also, we were discussing before our meeting here now about, you know, this big push on electric power, what's going to happen with it, how do we do it? Because at 53 kilowatts on these chargers, there's a massive drain on the national grid. Those things have got to be put into it, and how we produce that power through solar, through wind or whatever. I was going to ask you, it's a really simple question about I know we're going to plant more trees, and that seems to be the answer everywhere, and we are doing that. But we did many years ago, simple things like we did use some money so people could get water butts, and we gave a heavily discounted, and lots of people had those water butts. And we did it in conjunction with, I think it was Severn Trent then, or whoever the water company was. And it had a massive success. And I'm reminded by it, because I got my water bill the other day, and I've put a succession of tubs to collect it, you know, greenhouses, summer house, this, that, and the other, and off the main house. And it's made a massive difference to the bill. And I think we could do a bit more. I know it's only a sort of, pardon the pun, a drop in the ocean, but it will make a difference if there are any funding that's out there, and do we see any funding, that we apply for it, and then try and get those interested people in that, so that, because water is more valuable than oil at the end of the day, and nothing will work without it. So that's 1 or 2 thoughts there. Anybody else that wishes to say anything? There's no more, so we'll move the recommendation and pass on our thanks, you know, to the team. Thank you. We agreed? Agreed, thank you. We're now moving on to item 8, which is the sill. And is it Lewis? Lewis, I'm told it's Lewis. Come into our posh chamber, Lewis. We're real people. You're not looking at a screen. You're not going, you know, I can't hear you, I'm muted or whatever. So go for it.
Thank you, Leader. This is my first time out in 12 months, so I'm excited more than anything else. Yeah, this is just a report seeking approval for the commencement of a 4-week public consultation in regards to the Community Infrastructure Levy non-parish portion. The report is a assessment of projects that have been put forward under Regulation 59A of the Infrastructure Levy regulations, which sets out that local authorities have a duty to spend 15% of all SIL receipts, which are in a non-parish portion of the borough, on local community infrastructure projects. Those projects are nominated throughout the year, and the deadlines for those cut-offs are August the 31st. We had 4 projects that were put forward this year, and they are included within the project assessment and nominations document appendix to this report. of those projects, 2 of those have been allocated as suitable for shortlisting, and they are included, as I say, on LIS 0003 and LIS 0004, which are the Green Lung Corridor and the Arnold Marketplace development. The report breaks down an assessment of each of the projects and sets out why they are considered the most suitable. And as part of the consultation in accordance with the regulations, we're looking to undertake a 4-week consultation, putting adverts in the community infrastructures page on the Gedling Community newsletter, the community initiatives page on the Gedling Community and voluntary e-newsletter, and direct consultation with residential organisation groups throughout the borough. A dedicated SIL page will also be posted for the 4-week period so that anyone can put forward their comments or objections or indeed submit additional projects throughout the year later on. The recommendation is that the Cabinet approves the commencement of consultation running from the 7th of June for a period of 4 weeks to the shortlisted projects to identify and receive the SIL non-parish funding. Thank you for your time, and I'd like to take any questions.
Thank you, Lewis. Jenny, anybody?
No real questions. It's, I assume when the 2 that are not going forward at the moment will get an automatic re-evaluation at the next round. Is that correct, Lewis?
That is correct in regards to the first project that was nominated for the Netherfield Forum. The second project, which was for alleviation works to the back of Mapley Park, a lot of those projects were sort of double included really in the Green Lung project. So that one was recommended to be stricken off the recommendations. They will all be included in the consultation with the public, all 4 projects, but obviously the ones that will be listed for shortlisting are, as I said, the Green Lung and the Arnold Marketplace.
Assuming, Lewis, that councillors will get re-notified that they're able to put in, because it seems to me, I mean, there's money available there, and 4 applications doesn't, perhaps I'm being a bit cynical, but it doesn't seem to be an awful lot when there's money available and money short. So
absolutely,
yeah. If we can, encourage councillors to put applications in, I'm sure there is some help, isn't there, filling forms in?
By all means, yes.
Asking for myself personally, of course.
Yeah, so in terms of when this report was drafted and created back in February, just by way of a sort of verbal update, we've actually received, again, since February, an additional £27,000 in SIL receipts for the non-parish portion. So over a sort of a 3-month period, you can see the figures that are coming in on a continuous basis. So by all means, obviously councillors are encouraged to put forward projects, as is anybody else in the borough as well. It's not just limited to councillors, but the public as well. So yeah.
Thank you for the report, Lewis. I just think it's additional funds are always welcome, and it just shows you the quality of some of the projects that are put forward are very worthwhile, even if they don't make it immediately through to the shortlisting. But we know a number of projects have already been funded through the SIL. Clearly, I think there's a review going on, isn't there? So we don't quite know how that's going to operate in the future. But thank you for the report, and we look forward to the outcome of the shortlisted items. See which ones go through. Thank you.
No one else? No? Okay, I'll ask you to, on page 95, agree the recommendation which approves the commencement of the consultation on Monday, the 7th of June. We agreed? We agreed. Thank you. Thank you, Lewis. You can go back now to you.
Thank you.
Not for another year, we hope. Okay. So we're moving on to the final item, which is item 9, and that is the work forward plan. Any comments? Sorry. Just for noting. Yeah, just for noting, yeah. Yeah. I think Councillor Payne. Right.
Yeah, just on the forward plan, John, there's nowhere else appropriate to raise this, but I just want to put it on the record and perhaps ask that either we have a report back to Cabinet about this, or that we find a way through other means to raise these concerns. In recent weeks, I have been either sent or had voiced to me or been copied into very serious concerns about the service provision at Highcroft Surgery in Arnold. It's not the first time that I've received such feedback. Some of those pieces of feedback relate to quite serious issues in relation to patients not getting the adequate service that they need. I am the first to say on the record that clearly the last year and a bit has been incredibly difficult for our entire NHS and indeed our GP surgeries. And I'll be the first to accept that, you know, those pressures sometimes have put strain on some of those services. But these pieces of feedback and complaints about Highcroft Surgery, which services a wide section of the Arnold area that I represent, both at the Borough Council and the County Council, are not isolated. And as I say, some of them are quite serious. Such examples are people trying to get through to an appointment and either having the phone put down to them when they get through the 10 or 11 queue that they're in, or the system putting the phone down to them. Now, either way, whether it's deliberate or whether it's by accident, that clearly isn't acceptable and leads to frustration and upset and angst if you've got a relative or indeed yourself who isn't very well. And the other thing that gets fed back to me is a frustration, and indeed there may be a repudiation from those who run the surgery about this, but a perception from residents that an awful lot of money was spent on a brand new building, but that actually the bread and butter issues around actually treatment of patients and appointments and processes aren't being got right. And as I say, that perception may be incorrect, but it is the perception of residents. Myself and Councillor Wheeler in the recent elections were stopped by a handful of people who went into great detail about their concerns in relation to the surgery. I will just say for the public record that I am aware that the Care Quality Commission did do an inspection into the surgery in early 2016, and I think it was indicated as requires improvement, and as had previous inspections that indicate requires improvement. The CQC, as I understand it, did return later in that year in November and give a rating overall of good, but there still were some issues, I think, flagged. And as I understand it, most recently in July 2019, the Care Quality Commission took a view that they didn't see any substantive changes and that therefore they took a decision not to go back in and inspect the surgery recently. Clearly, a lot has changed since 2019. Clearly, there are concerns from our residents who we represent as the Borough Council. And what I'm getting from residents in Arnold is we don't feel we're being listened to, we don't feel we're being heard. So I'm just putting down here now on the public record, John, because I feel this is the most appropriate place to do it, that there are concerns, that whether those concerns are factually held or not, whether there are answers and responses from the surgery, which there may well be, we do need to find a way, John, of surfacing these either, I would say to the Chief Executive, through raising at the most senior level with the clinical commissioning group issues, but also maybe speaking to the Care Quality Commission and just asking them again whether they will go and take an independent look at what's going on in the surgery so we can get to the bottom of these issues, because, you know, we know at the moment with COVID, we know with other issues, access to healthcare and access to your local GP is really, really important. And where you've got situations where people's blood tests, etc., are being lost or they're not being reported to, that can cause great and considerable concern. And in the worst case scenario, it can lead to somebody not being appropriately diagnosed, etc. So I just want to flag that here, and I'd like some advice from the Chief Executive, even if not now, about whether we ought to be bringing a report back here to Cabinet so that there is a formal report and that residents know that we've raised this appropriately, or if not, whether we can find the appropriate channels to raise these issues. And I'll just finally say, not for want of trying, because I know that Councillor Wheeler certainly has raised some of these issues before with various organisations, and I think sometimes it feels like you're hitting your head against a brick wall. So I'm just putting that marker down, and I know you, Leader, have also received similar feedback from residents that you represent on the other side of Arnold. Thank you.
Henry.
Leader. I've received complaints from councillors as well. I also spoke to Councillor Ollingsworth about this very issue. I did send communication to the Chief Executive of Nottinghamshire NHS Clinical Commissioning on Friday about concerns about people not being able to access appointments, not being able to access treatment, and also other issues around, complaints around difficulties trying to book appointments and being stuck in queue systems for quite some time on those phone systems and so forth. So that was sent on Friday. I've not received a response as of yet, so I will chase that up. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Just echoing Michael's words there, the same thing came through in the Arnold South area, the problems with the high cross surgery. And I've observed the big queues. I know they're going to have to do it because of social distancing and everything else. But I look at other big surgeries, Park House, etc., and things like that. That seems to be working quite well. This was built under what I think was it semi-private lift system? And so I would say, Mike, that you'll chase that for us. Viv?
Yeah, I mean, just to echo, I've got personal experience as well of that not having appointments, which it seems contrary to other surgeries that are giving appointments. So I can't quite see the logic. In fact, just being told to go to A&E, which is not going to be helpful to A&E.
Yeah, it's just really, I mean, it's not going out there witch hunting and chasing people on that, but there's a problem there.